One touch without a rope on is all it takes. Never let go.
Once upon a time, there was a mother and her two sons. And nothing could hurt them as long as they stayed connected to their home.
I know this life's been hard on you boys since the world ended.
Don't feed the dog. We're not the only ones starving.
But the evil out there is clever. One touch without a rope on is all it takes. Never let go.
Never let go. Never let go. After your rope broke, did you notice anything? Why are you asking all these questions? Mama never lied to us.
It wants you to doubt me.
Maybe it's safe to leave.
That's what it wants you to think. That rope is your lifeline. Never let go.
Say it.
Never let go.
Maybe the world's still out there.
We're in the world now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, bucolic single parents. And if you don't know what the hell that means, Google it. Learn something, goddammit. Anyway, how the hell you been, Mike?
Doing pretty good. Was dealing with a minor power outage before we recorded, but luckily it got restored without knocking our schedule off the loop. So here we are with another episode. Also with us, it's Dawn and Nelly. What's up, Dawn?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
Okay, well, this week we had another circumstance of kind of having a double release of horror movies, so there's a chance we might cover the other one later in the week as a bonus, but due to scheduling and how we could all work it out, we are covering Never Let Go on this episode. So let's get some info on Never Let Go. It stars Halle Berry from the director Alexander Aja, who everyone should be familiar with by now. And the synopsis is as follows. A family that has been haunted by an evil spirit for years. Their safety and their surroundings come into question when one children questions if the evil is real. All right. I just noticed on the synopsis that first sentence is kind of like a weird structured sentence. But anyways, yeah. So
grammar is expecting grammar on IMDb is a fool's errand.
Yeah. I think that's the problem, because sometimes I pre-read the synopsis and if I have to reword it, but then sometimes I'm reading it fresh for the first time, and halfway through a sentence I'm like, wait a minute. But anyways, grammar aside, that pretty much describes the synopsis, setting us up. So we will start with general thoughts as always. Venom, what are your thoughts on Never Let Go?
Before I start, listeners, please excuse me. I am fighting a cold right now, which prevented me from seeing the other movie that we were going to talk about. But so unfortunately, I won't be my normal effervescent self today. So bear with me. Overall, I gotta say, I really, really enjoyed this movie. I got a funny feeling I'm going to be the highest of the three of us because I genuinely was on board for this movie from beginning to end. The mystery of it really worked for me. I liked that early on in the film, Aja kind of puts the idea in your head of maybe none of this is actually happening, that this is all in Mama's head. Mama, of course, being played by Halle Berry. And then, there's just events throughout the film that kind of support that it's a hallucination. And then there's other events that support, no, this is actually real and it's happening. And I love cinema like that challenges the viewer. I could see people, stating directly, yes, the quote unquote evil of this film is 100% real. And I wouldn't argue with those people. And then on the other side of the fence, I could see people saying, no, this is 100% all in Halle Berry's head. And I wouldn't argue with those people either, because there's valid defenses for both of those positions. And I love films like that. Yes, I think a lot of logical people, especially people that take this at face value, are going to lean a little bit heavier one way or the other. But, knowing Alexander Aja, his filmmaking style, the fact that he's yet to disappoint me. I mean, this man has an amazing track record. I mean, this is close to Carpenter in the 80s. I don't know that I've ever seen a bad Aja movie. I mean, Mirrors maybe was one of the lesser of the bunch, and I still absolutely had a great time with that one. So this is a director that I'm always excited about when they have a new movie coming out. It was recently announced that he'll be back for Crawl 2, so I'm very excited about that one, as Crawl was one of my favorite movies of that particular year. But as far as Never Let Go goes, like I said, the mystery of it worked for me from beginning to end. The evil, quote unquote, that we see in the film, I think is portrayed beautifully. I think these performances are great. I think Halle Berry does a great job. This isn't like Halle Berry's best performance by any stretch of the imagination. She is an Oscar-winning actress, of course. But I still think that she gives a very convincing performance. I think the two boys do a really great job. Later in the film, we're introduced to some newer characters that aren't in the film for very long, but again, they did a great job with what they needed to do. We've got beautiful cinematography. Obviously, when the entirety of the film is shot in the woods, it's not ultra hard to get beautiful cinematography, but I mean, this is still a beautifully shot film. It's got a great score. Like I said, there's very little to me for me to complain about. Very little cringe-worthy moments, no terrible line deliveries, no completely out of left field revelations that leave you scratching your head. I mean, this movie for me personally is solid beginning to end. Now, is this a top 10 candidate for the year? I wouldn't go that far. It definitely didn't blow me away necessarily. But when I can watch an hour and 40-minute long movie that from beginning to end has me entertained, intrigued, and involved with the story and sympathizing with the characters too. This is a movie where you don't really want to see anyone get hurt. There's no shitty characters. There's no, guilty pleasure kills in this movie. It's just watching this family traverse this world of, supposed evil entities haunting them in the woods. And it just works for me in every way. I had a really good time with it. Unfortunately, I didn't see it in the quietest of theaters. I had some fairly disrespectful moviegoers in my cinema, to the point that I actually missed the entire monologue that Halle Berry's character has at the beginning of the film. I don't think it's more than a few lines, but I just completely missed it. So hopefully when we get to the walkthrough, one of my co-hosts will remember and even enlighten me on what she actually says there. Whether it's vital to the film or not, I don't know. But ultimately, like I said, really good film, really good creature, quote unquote creature, if you will. Very similar to something that we saw last year in When Evil Lurks. So, I mean, any time a movie reminds me of my favorite movie of 2023, I'm on board for it. So, the ending is satisfying. I mean, the ending might leave some people scratching their head, like I said. I've only seen the movie once. I was not, because I'm kind of fighting this cold here. Like I said, I wasn't able to see the other movie that I was supposed to see this weekend, and I didn't get a chance to watch this one a second time as I usually do for Fresh Cuts reviews. But regardless, I had a really good time with this one. Definitely not a roller coaster ride of a horror film. It's not like it's ultra fun from beginning to end. But like I said, the mystery of what's going on in this cabin, in this neck of the woods, all works for me. The whole thing with the rope, keeping the family members, quote unquote, safe, was kind of a cool element because, again, you know, you could flip a coin basically and say, did they actually need the rope or did they not need the rope? Or was that all in Mama's head? Like I said, it's all up to the interpretation of the viewer, and I love films like this. I tend to say that I'm not the biggest fan of ambiguous endings, but this one worked for me because ultimately, you know, we get to see some characters actually make it, quote unquote, out of the forest and, you know, supposedly have their happy ending, but it still leaves that, you know, that inclination in the back of your head of, man, did this all really happen? Did it not really happen? Is this all, you know, was this Halle Berry just maybe transferring her psychosis to her kids? I mean, there's definitely a lot of layers in this one that you can kind of peel back and talk about. Obviously, we don't get a whole lot of backstory in this one. It's just we're thrown into the events, and you know, we just kind of have to take Halle Berry's like backstory at face value, even though it's not the most involved backstory. We don't get like an origin of the evil. She even makes a statement during the film, which I'll keep to myself for now, but she makes a statement that kind of, it's like, wait a minute, really? But then we don't get any explanation for that statement. It just kind of ends. So, but ultimately, like I said, the movie was just ambiguous enough to not frustrate me. And the ending was just satisfying enough to leave me really, really enjoying this movie and pretty much confidently saying Alexander Aja is one of the most consistent horror directors working today. You can make an argument for Oz Perkins, but Aja obviously has a longer filmography and a longer streak of quality movies out. I'm sure Perkins will probably catch up, and some of the other directors too that have come out, like Astor and Eggers and things like that. So, but ultimately, my general thoughts are I genuinely enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed almost all aspects of it. And yeah, I highly recommend this one. Whether it's vital to watch it in theaters, I don't know that it's necessarily an essential theater watch. I think the other movie that we'll talk about later in the week is probably more so an essential theater watch. But this one was still really, really fun. Great atmosphere, great tension. Really, almost everything I look for in a horror film, other than, you know, some intense, gory kills. But otherwise, a great little mystery. I mean, some people might not even look at this as a horror movie, depending on whether you believe the events of the movie actually happened. Some people might just consider this a psychological thriller. And like I said, either way, I wouldn't argue with people that are on either side of the fence, because ultimately there's quality to be had here, both for horror fans and thriller fans. And hell, just Halle Berry fans. I mean, like I said, I think she does a great job. And if you're a fan of her work, I think this is definitely a great example of what she can do. Even though it's not, like I said, Oscar worthy necessarily, it's still a solid performance. So yeah, for me, I give this one a high recommend. Like I said, whether it's vital to watch it in the theater, I mean, if you're a theater guy like I am, then I would say absolutely yes. But because there's so many horror films already playing in theaters, and in the next 2 months we have a whole slew of more horror movies coming, you know, I understand that, you know, your movie going dollars need to be stretched as far as they can. So, you know, if you can't make it to this one in the theater, definitely check it out when it hits streaming, because yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. So I'll leave my general thoughts at that for now.
All right, let's kick it over to Dawn. What do you think of Never Let Go?
Yeah, I'm not as high on it as Venom is, but I still really enjoyed it. Again, there's there's a decent enough story. It's not the most original, it's not the most creative, but it's serviceable enough for what it's trying to do. It gives us a chance to know the family. the doubt whether or not she's telling the truth or not kind of plays right into what's going on here, and how the hauntings are staged. How I don't really want to give too much away, but how in almost every single one, there's a few that kind of breach the rule, but in almost every single one of them, there's you don't know whether or not that they're actual genuine hauntings, or whether or not it's just somebody playing tricks on somebody. And as he was saying, like the mystery of what's happening here kind of takes center stage and makes it feel, far more intriguing than what you shouldn't expect, like than what you wouldn't expect. The film rambles along at a great pace. There's not a whole lot of downtime here. The family's worth following. You get emotionally invested in the, different relationships that happen. Everybody kind of plays their part pretty well for, what it's worth. I mean, I'm not the best judge, but everybody seems to be like, it feels, decently enough that you kind of believe the stories. And, like when the hauntings start taking place and you start realizing what's happening, everything kind of falls in line with, questioning whether or not they did happen, whether or not, this is true, whether or not they, is something else going on. And it kind of keeps you, invested in this far more than most other films that kind of play with this idea, like, this family curse or the spectral being that's, taking over a family. It does kind of start getting a little bit predictable in the third act. You kind of start, putting the pieces into play, and everything kind of starts having, far less, confusing narratives, and it kind of starts playing its hand out a little bit more. Not necessarily as, bad of a job as the other, some of the other films out there, but to me, I think the third act probably could have used a little bit more time to it. That's kind of where it does, I wouldn't say fall apart, but that's kind of where you start realizing that it is a little bit more of a predictable film. It does start going on with, far more obvious tropes and sequences. It kind of it peters out, which is a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, other than that, I had fun with it. Not top 10 of the year. I think there's a couple of other films that I would put above this, but I can't say that it's a bad time. You may have seen this before, but it's handled well enough. And I mean, really, the only ones that are going to have an issue with this are the ones that don't really care for this kind of style or genre. So, I mean, yeah, I do agree it's not an essential theater watch, but we've had far worse come out this year. We're probably going to get far worse than this for the rest of the year. Maybe some sooner than late others, but yeah, I had fun with it. It maybe could have shaved off a few more minutes if it would have worked some things out better in the end, but it's not going to be too much of a time sink. It still looks really good. Atmosphere is still really immersive, and it has a lot to like about that. And yeah, overall, it's a solid enough time. Not a top 10 of the year, but definitely worth your time.
All right, so that would go to me. I kind of mostly agree. This was a fun time. I thought it was pretty effective. Now, I'll differ in the fact that personally, I thought it kind of in the question of like, is it real? Is it not? I personally thought it tipped its hand kind of early, and I was waiting for aspects to go the other way, but I thought there was just too much evidence in one direction early on, which kind of surprised me. That in my mind that it weighed so heavily in one direction early on that most of the rest of the movie I was kind of consciously thinking like, okay, when are we going to get the things that would like tip the scales in the other direction? And towards, I would say, end of second act, third act, they did throw in I guess, some stuff that could make you question it, but I had my mind made up relatively early. However, that didn't really affect the movie overall for me. I still thought it was effective because even if you think in one direction 100% or let's say 90%, there's still a lot going on in the movie as far as the relationship between the mother and her sons and trying to survive out there, whether there's creatures or not. Like it almost, there's a whole movie going on just within that household and the dynamic and the brothers having like disagreements amongst themselves. Like everyone's not all in agreement 100% with everything that's going on. I liked kind of like the world that was almost created within that house to counteract what was going on or supposedly going on, whichever way you might think. Halle Berry was great. Like I think Venom said, she's an Oscar winner. Whether you think this is like one of her strongest performances or not, it doesn't matter. She was still great as the mom. I guess you could refer to her as the overbearing mom or the overprotective mom or the mom just trying to survive another day with her kids in the woods. Um, I will say that like I thought, assuming by the story, that they had been out there for like a long time, maybe even um actually no, you know what? I'm not, maybe okay, they were out there less because I was gonna say she's not the greatest living off the grid person because like they definitely were struggling to uh farm or raise any type of crops, so like that definitely put a foil in their survival plans. But I did like kind of like the fact that if she truly believes what is happening in the world is happening, and they're not exactly like the world's greatest living off the land folks, it's like the clock is ticking. And I did like how that kind of pushed forward the story as far as like, well, something's got to give because like yes, she wants to keep them in this house as like a safe haven from what's going on in the world, but you do have to like eat and drink to survive. So it's like things are happening, and it does culminate in a big decision that Halle Berry's mom character decides to make in the third act that it probably had people on edge. I don't even want to like describe it, but like something was about to happen and I was like, oh man, please no. But yeah, overall I thought it was a solid movie. Top 10 probably not, only because 2024 is actually turning out to be pretty good. I mean, I could see in like a lesser year this hovering around it, but um oh well, it doesn't matter. That just means that like we're starting to get like a stockpile of good movies this year, which is good. It's always better to struggle with your top 10. But yeah, I would recommend seeing it. Now, because it's a 2 movie release week, not to tip my hand, but if I could only see one, I would say see the other one, which is The Substance. But that's just me because I can usually only get out to one movie a week, and since I've already seen them both, I can make that judgment. But it's not, for people who haven't seen it yet, that's their decision to make. But if you could see both, I would still see it in the theater. To me, if it's a good movie, I would say see it in the theater because I'm a theater person. And the another reason is because the cinematography in this, as has already been mentioned, it's a beautiful looking movie. I love the setting in the woods, and seeing woods in these wide landscapes. I think it's almost essential watching it in a theater because it's immersive. You really kind of feel the setting of this movie when they're walking around with their ropes tied to them, and obviously those ropes are going to run out at some point or they're going to get tangled, just the natural way things work. So that kind of helps see to me on that huge screen. It kind of just immerses you in the vastness of what it would be like living kind of way out secluded in the middle of nowhere. But I think I'll leave my general thoughts at that because otherwise it's just saying we're repeating a lot of stuff. So Venom, back to you.
You mentioned the rope and the whole gag with the rope keeping them safe. I actually am really, really glad, because I was fully expecting there to be a scene where the rope was going to become a problem, where the rope was either going to get tangled or end up like accidentally strangling somebody, or like something, you know, over the top was going to happen with the rope. But they never did that, and I love that. You know, Alexander has a way of setting up your expectations, but then thwarting them in the best possible way. So I was very happy to see that. I mean, ultimately, the rope doesn't even, by the third act, the rope plays very little part in the movie. And I kind of like that again once we get, I don't know if we could really call it a reveal, because like I said, ultimately saying this right now isn't much of a spoiler. And I've already said it. It's definitely going to be up to the interpretation of the viewer, whether you believe the events of this movie actually happened, or you don't believe, you know, the events of this movie happen. But regardless, the movie has a very telling final line by one of the boys that's like, ah, shit. Like, you know, it's one of those, oh, damn type line deliveries that's like, it doesn't even matter whether the events happened or not. These boys are fucked anyway. But obviously, you can't get into specifics right now. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I just really, really enjoyed this movie. I dare not say I loved it. That might be a little bit of a stretch. I did have kind of the same issues that Don had, where the movie started to get a little bit, some of the set pieces maybe started to get a little bit predictable. But it doesn't mean that it necessarily is a detriment or that it hurt my experience with it, you know? I definitely didn't see the ending coming. I definitely didn't see that major event that happens at the end of the second act, beginning of the third act coming. So yeah, for whatever it's worth, I just had a great, great time with this one. And hopefully it's not a detriment that I saw this one first and it doesn't end up hurting my viewing of The Substance when I finally do get a chance to go see that later this week. But yeah, for whatever it's worth, from beginning to end, I was on board for this movie. I mean, it sounds like I want to give it a 10 out of 10, but objectively, I can't. There's still, you know, for the most part, the pacing is solid, but there are moments in the second act with some of the family scenes that if you're not completely invested in the drama, the family drama, then those scenes might drag out a little bit for you specifically. I was invested in the family drama, so I had no issue with the slower pace of the second act and the more kind of conversational aspect of many scenes of the second act. You know, not a whole lot of horror set pieces necessarily, but just some, you know, great performances. I think both these boys, Anthony Jenkins as Samuel, and then Percy Daggs the fourth as Nolan. I think both of them did a really good job. And it's funny because they play twin boys, but they have very different personalities. You know, the one who's older by a whole 3 minutes is very much believing everything that his mother tells him unconditionally, basically even saying multiple times in the movie, Mama would never lie to us. Whereas, you know, the younger brother Nolan, because he has a certain experience in the first act of the film, starts to question the reality of everything that Mama's telling him. So yeah. Like I said,
it's reminiscent of several movies over, I would say, the last decade, because they kind of do the classic, like, is the monster out there or is the actual monster like within the house type of thing, like, and I think they do it pretty well. Like I said, the only thing for me, like, and I don't even know if I would call it a criticism, it's just that for me, I felt that they tipped it off pretty early in the movie just because of a few things that happened, and I never really, nothing happened throughout the course of the rest of the movie to really convince me, because there's even some of the instances where you could point to and say, well, what about this? To me, the way it went down was so, how can I say this without spoiling? It was very, like, identical to the way characters, like, stories were said earlier in the movie, that I'm like, oh, okay. So I think I have a pretty good handle on, like, what they're getting at with it, and which I won't even mention now. But other than that, like I said, it didn't hurt the overall enjoyment of the movie because I still liked, or I still enjoyed seeing everything play out regardless. So yeah.
So I'm
Yeah, I
trying to
think.
remember.
Oh,
I'm
go
saying I'm
ahead,
trying to
Bob.
remember back. I wish I could have been able to take more detailed notes or have like a second viewing of it. I didn't realize what was going on until like nearly an hour in. That was when I first started realizing it. That was when I think that was when I finally started, getting the idea together that I should have been paying attention to all of the set pieces and the hauntings. Maybe it would have been maybe if I would have like actually realized that I was supposed to pay attention, because I didn't realize that it was supposed to be like the quote unquote, you know, like, is it really happening kind of a thing. I just took it as they were being haunted because I didn't know the plot before going in. I just took it as, oh, a family's being haunted, and then it's slowly. I took it more as that was supposed to have been a twist, that it was whether or not it's actually happening, and then it was only later on that I realized that's what how we were supposed to be feeling all along. So it wasn't until like an hour or so in that I finally started putting together whether or not it was tipping its hand or not.
Well, I think you're correct, Don, that I don't necessarily think it was trying to. I just think that, and maybe, and like I
Yeah,
said,
that's what.
maybe it's just because we've had a handful of these types of movies over the
Yeah,
past decade where, to me, it showed some of those, like, I don't even want to say cliche. I wouldn't even, because cliche sounds derogatory. I wouldn't say cliche, but just kind of like those uh tip-offs maybe where it starts planting the seed in your mind. I don't know. Like I haven't researched a lot of the movies since watching it because I only watched it today. So there's a chance that maybe they weren't trying to keep it hidden, and maybe I just, maybe thought that was the goal. Um but yeah, I don't know for sure because I'd have to see interviews with like the director and see like what their intentions
yeah,
were, see what other people thought. Like usually I'll go out and read like review threads to get like a greater audience thoughts just to see the differences, but I haven't really had a chance to do any of that.
yeah. I get what I'm
I
saying. I
had a
mean, watching. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I actually had a completely different experience as far as whether I believed or didn't believe. Early on, when we get that very first set piece, which we'll talk about in the walkthrough, I had a very solid inclination of what was happening, whether this was actually real or not. By the end of the movie, I flipped. And the only thing I'm going to say, and don't don't expand on this, please, gentlemen, the picture. That's all I'm going to say. The picture at the
Yeah,
end of the movie completely changed my mind on what
yeah.
I thought I was watching. So,
I can
and
see
but
that.
the
Yeah,
thing is too, yeah. But the thing is too, Aja could have stuck that in there as like a little, almost like a little fuck you to the audience, like, oh, here you go, because no one saw the picture. Obviously, when we get to the walkthrough, we'll talk about the picture and what it may have represented. But the fact that no one on the scene picked up the picture and asked, hey, what's that? It was just kind of in the woods, and it's only there for the viewers of the film. You
Yeah.
could still make the argument that,
You
maybe, you know.
you kind of already answered, or you already kind of gave both perspectives on the picture, so I don't really have to say anything because that's what I was gonna say. Is like
Yeah.
I agree that the picture, you could see the picture as throwing a wrinkle in the is it or is it not, but then it's like when you think about the picture in the context of like the movie, it's like, well, no one actually saw it except the audience, so it's like,
Mhm.
is the picture literal or is it supposed to be like a metaphorical thing of
Yeah.
like what it's representing?
Exactly. And that's just, but it kind of just alludes to the brilliance of Alexander Aja. Aja's maybe not considered, one of the greatest horror directors out working right now, but I will say that he's absolutely one of the most consistent. I'm not going to necessarily say that any of his movies are 10 out of 10s, but the fact that a majority of them are 8 out of 10s or above, that says a lot to me because, ultimately, no matter how great a director, once a director's made 5, 6, 7 films, there's almost always at least one turkey in there that, maybe it was a studio interference thing, maybe it was working with a giant budget for the first time, whatever the case may be. But yeah, to look back at Alexander's filmography, I mean, I go back 20 years and I don't see a bad movie in there. And like I said, Mirrors is probably the lesser of the bunch, but I still absolutely loved Mirrors, and there's a kill in that movie that I absolutely love. To this day, it's one of my favorite kill scenes ever. So, and I'm sure if you've seen Mirrors, you know the one I'm talking about.
I mean, mine was Horns, but I know what you're talking about.
Oh, Horns, yes. Oh, goddamn. Probably Daniel Radcliffe's one of his best performances, and it's a movie that barely anyone saw, which is so upsetting. But yeah, Horns was spectacular as well. All right, folks, I guess that'll be your final spoiler warning. If you have not seen Let It Go and are interested in seeing it or plan on seeing it soon, go ahead and pause the podcast and come back to us after you check it out. If you're not interested in the film or you've already seen it, go ahead and join us and find out our more detailed thoughts on the movie. As I said, I am fighting a cold, so this walkthrough may be a little bit quicker than usual for a movie that I enjoyed this much, but I'm going to try to get through this as much as I can without coughing in your ears. So here we go. Like I said, the movie opens up with a monologue by Halle Berry's character, which I completely missed because of some inconsiderate moviegoers sitting next to me. Whether it was vital information or not, I'm sure it was just like some cryptic talk that just set up the mood of the film, whatever the case may be. So
yeah, I wish I was paying more attention. It was basically about the environment and why they were in the woods.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, like I said, I wish I would have seen this a second time to take more detailed notes, but that's basically what I remember of it. Because the thing is that I saw this one first before The Substance, so the not having notes and then seeing two kind of close together with doesn't really leave a lot of room in memory. But that was, I think, the gist of it. I think that it was cool. Basically about why they were there and what they were doing.
Awesome. All right.
I may be wrong, but that was what I took.
Okay, no worries. All right, so like I said, after the monologue, the opening monologue, we're introduced to Halle Berry, whose character's name is Mama. I'm pretty sure that one of the spirits in the movie actually used her real name. I'll mention that when we get to the scene, but she's still just Mama in the credits. And even when you watch the movie, in the closing credits of the film, yeah, her character's name is Mama. We're introduced to Mama and her two twin boys, Samuel and Nolan. You probably wouldn't be able to tell that they're twins. They're not necessarily identical, but they were born 3 minutes apart. So, for whatever it's worth, yes, they are twins. And obviously, we see them living in the woods, living alone, off the grid, no electronics of any kind. They're basically eating like squirrel meat and rabbit and things like that. Like, they're true survivalists, if you will, or at least they're trying to be, because obviously as the movie goes along, we find out that they're not the best survivalists out there. So the first kind of set piece that kind of gets the gears in your brain moving is the family goes out. Basically every day when the sun comes up, they go out to forage for food, plants, animals, whatever they can get their hands on. And of course, if you've seen the trailer, then you know that they tie a rope around themselves that's anchored to the house itself. And Halle Berry basically tells them, as long as you are touching this rope, the evil can't touch you. And they call it the evil throughout the whole movie. It never gets a proper name, so it's just the evil. And in that opening scene, when we go out, one of the boys accidentally. The boys get into a disagreement. That's what it is. One of the boys thinks, I think it's Nolan, the younger brother, thinks he hears his older brother Sam, because they're getting into an argument about why Sam is kind of like the mama's boy, why she always trusts him, she always believes him, he always does everything she says. And then kind of out of the silence of the woods, you hear, "'Cause Mama loves me more." We don't actually see Sam say it. And then when Nolan says, "What did you just say?" Sam says, "I didn't say anything," basically denying that he said anything. So to kind of retaliate for what Nolan thinks Sam said, he kind of steps on his rope, which makes Sam trip over some rocks, breaking his leg. He actually breaks his leg very early in the movie. And he breaks his leg and lands. He kind of falls down a hill And while he falls down the hill, he gets separated from the rope. The rope basically somehow it gets untied and he gets detached from it. So he's at the bottom of the hill, and at the bottom of this hill, there's a tree stump. There, it looks like an ancient tree stump, and there's like almost like whispers, like evil whispers coming from the tree stump, and they start getting louder and louder to the point that Sam actually covers his ears, and we as the audience in the theater, hear the sound as well. Nolan doesn't hear it. Nolan is just basically the whole time he's yelling at his brother, Sam, are you okay? Are you okay? All three of the family members have like makeshift whistles, like homemade whistles that they made that they carved out of wood. So if any of them get into any trouble, they blow their whistle and Mama will come running. So of course, Nolan blows his whistle. Mama comes running, and as soon as she comes running, she actually sees something start to approach Sam. At this point, like I said, Sam is covering his ears and his eyes are closed, so he's not looking or listening to anything. But Halle Berry she's running and she sees something going towards her son, and it's basically an older woman, very decrepit. She's got a forked CGI tongue, which I thought was actually kind of cool. Yeah, I wish it wasn't CGI, yes, but I'll take what I can get. Which instantly, and that's the other thing too. I mean, within 10 minutes, we see a creature in this movie, so there's not a lot of waiting. What there is, though, is the doubt, because Mama tries to basically Mama is running towards the creature that is crawling towards her son. She pulls a knife out of her pocket. It looks like she's going to attack the creature, but what she ends up doing is she runs past the creature and grabs her boys and runs back up to the top of the hill. Once all three of them are at the top of the hill, Mama takes her rope and ties it around all three of them. And what we see is this evil entity, this old, rotting, decrepit woman in a just nasty nightgown covered in like blood and pus and whatever else. And she's standing right behind Mama, and just, making evil noises, not really saying anything, but just kind of hissing and growling and everything else. And, Mama has the two boys, with their heads ducked down and their ears covered, so they can't see or hear anything. Eventually, when they get back home, Nolan realizes that he never saw or heard anything. He didn't hear anything that Sam claimed to have heard coming from that weird tree stump. And he also claims to have not seen anything that Mama supposedly saw. So eventually Nolan asks her, what did it look like today? Well, because apparently it's kind of a common thing for Mama to see this thing in the woods daily, but it wears different skins. It's, whether it's a shapeshifter or a true demonic, entity, whatever the case may be, it appears as different people. And one thing that I really like about the movie is that there's at least two instances in the film where we as the audience see something that Halle Berry doesn't. Yes, there's multiple instances where Halle Berry's character notices the entity as well and just ignores it and just keeps walking, because in her eyes, as long as she's got the rope tied to her, they can't touch her. Now, we never get an explanation as to how that is. I mean, the closest thing I can come up with is that Mama believes that the house that they're staying is made of like sacred wood or something, some kind of wood that will protect them. Maybe it's been blessed. There's multiple like messages carved into the wood all through the house. So she believes that as long as they are still connected to the house by the rope, that they are safe. Evil cannot get them. And that's kind of what it looks like at first, because at the end of this scene, the entity just kind of disappears and just leaves the family alone. Hence why Nolan questions later in the evening, what Mama saw. Excuse me, folks. If I go silent for a minute, that's just me coughing into my muted mic, so bear with me here. When Nolan asks Mama, what did it look like, she actually tells Nolan it looked like my mother. So basically, Mama is seeing family members as this evil entity, and they're always like, antagonizing her and, doing, trying to convince her to let her kids go outside without the rope. And, we'll get into more scenes like that as the movie goes along. So, of course, Nolan starts to distrust his mother. He starts to think that maybe Mama doesn't actually know what's going on, and not necessarily that she's lying to us, but that, maybe the things that she's seeing in her head aren't actually there. And like I said, for the mere fact that in this first scene, Mama sees the evil, but the boys never see it. So that kind of puts an idea in your head of, is this real or is it not? And I think most people will make the same assumption that it's just Mama, being crazy. But like I said, the events of the rest of the movie may support that, or they may make you flip completely like it did for me. So we'll go with that. So eventually we see the family kind of just having fun as Sam is healing his broken leg, which, a leg takes 4 to 6 weeks to heal, if I remember, or a broken bone takes 4 to 6 weeks to heal. So that 4 to 6 weeks went by basically in a montage where we basically see the family having some fun. They have a record player, one of the old crank ones, so they don't need power. They don't necessarily need electricity. And they own a couple of records, and they're kind of, it's funny because the songs sound kind of like from the antebellum period, like slave songs. Not necessarily slave songs, but songs sung and performed by white Southerners during the antebellum period. It just kind of sounds like that. I know, like the record that they play more than once is what, Rock Candy Mountain, I think it is, which is kind of an interesting title. So like I said, Sam eventually heals his leg. We get more events of, Mama going outside and seeing things that may or may not be there. Like, she recognizes that they're there. Every now and again, like I said, we'll see one that's just for the audience, which it's like, if the director is going to take the time to put this entity on the screen just for the audience, it's, it starts to make you think, well, how could this be fake? Like, is he trying to make the audience think that they're insane, that we're having the hallucination as well as Halle Berry? I don't know. But yeah, there are multiple instances where we as the audience see something that Halle doesn't. So let's see. As it turns out, Nolan is a sleepwalker, and he actually wears a bell. He wraps a bell around his ankle before he goes to bed at night, so that in case he gets up and starts sleepwalking, he doesn't accidentally walk outside of the house without the rope and just go walking into the woods. Well, what ends up happening? Exactly that. Nolan ends up sleepwalking one night. And the thing is, he actually is wearing his bell this evening, but for whatever reason, Mama doesn't hear it. Sam doesn't hear it. He ends up outside, like not just on the porch, but literally probably about 10 to 12 feet away from the house in the middle of the night with no rope around him. And eventually Mama realizes that he's outside. She goes running outside, grabs him, and then basically makes him say this oath. Supposedly, it's like an oath that the evil can't, like, if a person is possessed by this evil, they can't say these words. It's something along the lines of, this house is holy. It's our paradise, blah, blah, blah. Just almost like a prayer, if you will. She makes him say it more than once while holding a goddamn hunting knife right above his head. Like, Halle Berry is ready to kill her own kids if she's convinced that they're possessed by this entity. And throughout the film, we actually find out that Halle Berry killed her whole damn family, believing that they were all possessed. She killed her mother, she killed her father, and then she killed her husband. She killed the boy's father, all believing that they had succumbed to the evil, that they were now possessed. Whether they did or not, again, that's up to your interpretation as the viewer. At one point, as Mama is hanging out outside on the porch by herself, she sees the entity of her ex-husband, and in the credits, he's just called Father. And basically, he shows up, and he's the first of the entities that's actually speaking coherently. Obviously, the first woman, just kind of growls and hisses until later in the film, which we haven't gotten to yet. But this is the first entity that's actually speaking to her. And they're literally having a conversation where, the guy is saying, can I see my boys? I haven't seen them in so long. And obviously, Mama isn't going to be tricked. She's like, nope, you were just trying to get my kids. But then finally, the tone of Father's voice changes, and even the timbre, like, it almost starts to reverberate very much like a doubled demonic voice, like someone who's possessed, their voice kind of doubles. And he basically starts screaming, just give me my kids. Would you rather they starve? They're just going to die of starvation if you don't. You might as well just let me have them and let us be together. Of course, Mama says no, goes back into the house, and that's pretty much the end of that scene. So again, more fuel for the fire on whether Mama's just hallucinating or if this is all really happening. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and go to that big event that happens at the end of the second act, beginning of the third act. Basically, Nolan, no pun intended, is at the end of his rope. He doesn't believe Mama at all anymore because of the sleepwalking incident where he got all the way outside with no rope and nothing happened. And then because of a couple of days earlier when Sam, or not a couple of days earlier, a couple of weeks earlier when Sam broke his leg, he was separated from the rope and nothing happened to him either, other than the broken leg. So of course, Nolan is just not convinced anymore. So at one point, while Mama is in the greenhouse trying to deal with some of the plants, because they have their own greenhouse, and they grow fruits and vegetables all spring and summer for the winters, which apparently are very cruel. And this movie does take place
they try.
during the winter.
They're trying to.
We actually get this great montage of the pantry like slowly emptying out, like food, like jars that were full are suddenly empty, and it's like eventually the family, it has no food left, no vegetables, no fruit, no meat of any kind. They obviously have plenty of water because they're in the woods, so they either have a well or they live near a river where they can get fresh water. But yeah, they're basically starving. So at this point, they have no food, and they're literally just eating bark. They're eating bark and bugs, like they'll peel the bark off of trees, and then whatever bugs they find in there, they'll grab them, and they'll actually fry them up in a cast iron skillet when they get home. So yeah. But yeah, the worst is, when they're literally just eating tree bark. Like there's no animals left in the woods. There's no bugs left on the trees underneath the bark. They're literally just eating fried bark, seasoned with tree sap, no less. So yeah, that sounds freaking delicious. So anyway, one day, or is it day or night? I think this scene takes place during the day. One day, Mama's out in the greenhouse, hoping against hope that she can get something to grow in there. And then Nolan comes out with no rope on, and Mama sees it and says, "Whoa, what's going on? Where's your rope?" Suddenly we see Nolan pull out a machete, and he's still not in the greenhouse. He's probably like 6 to 8 feet outside of the greenhouse while Mama's still in the greenhouse. So it almost seems like he's been possessed and he's about to attack his mother with a machete. Instead, he takes the machete and cuts her rope, so she's no longer connected to the house. And then he closes the greenhouse door and locks her in. Now, Sam, the older brother, realizes that Nolan did this, so he comes running out. Sam and Nolan end up getting into a fight, like a fist fight. They're scrambling. Sam obviously doesn't want his mother not attached to the house while she's anywhere away from the house. Nolan doesn't believe that any of this evil actually exists anymore, and is basically doing this to prove his mother wrong. Well, what ends up happening is while Sam and Nolan are wrestling outside the greenhouse, suddenly that evil entity, the original evil entity, the old woman, who, by the way, did you guys see who played the evil? Not that she's a big name or anything, but she's freaking adorable. She looks nothing like the evil, old, nasty woman that we see in the movie. But if either of you are on IMDb, go ahead and click on her name. It's Stephanie Levine. She's freaking adorable. I couldn't get over it. That's the woman that played evil. Anyway, the evil starts talking to her and starts calling her a bloated little goat and an ungrateful little bitch and blah, blah, blah. And then she finally says, when I get inside of you, I'm going to make you destroy your kids. You're going to kill them. You're going to eat them. I'm going to make sure that there's nothing left of them after I get inside of you. And Halle Berry, throughout this conversation with the evil, she's been trying to break open some windows, some of the glass windows in the the greenhouse, excuse me. I forgot the name for a second. In the greenhouse, but is unsuccessful in being able to get out. Well, once this entity starts talking about what it's going to make her do to her kids, she literally reaches behind her, grabs a broken piece of glass from one of the windows that she cracked, and unceremoniously slits her own throat. And my friends, this is like the end of the second act. Like, there's still a half hour left in this movie, and one of our three main stars has just offed herself. So obviously, there's multiple shots where she's inside looking at the entity, but then when the boys look inside the greenhouse, there's nothing in there with her. So, again, more support for the argument one way or the other. And finally, when Sam is finally able to get back into the greenhouse, Mama's dead. Eyes are open, blood everywhere. She's totally gone. But Sam, being so young, doesn't really understand. He keeps telling his mother to wake up, wake up, wake up. We eventually see Nolan slowly back away from the scene and go back in the house. Very Homer Simpson's in the bushes. It just kind of backs away slowly. That night, Sam is distraught. He's basically in bed, and he's just like, what did you do? Why did you do this? Nolan is trying to apologize. And then, and this whole time, Sam has been getting sick. Obviously, the boys are malnourished. Sam being the bigger of the two boys, even though they're twins, Sam is slightly taller. He's slightly bigger. So obviously he needs more sustenance than his younger brother. Younger by 3 minutes anyway. And so he starts deteriorating. We actually start to see his face get gaunt, thin and kind of almost gray, almost like he's slowly rotting. Not literally, but just, he just looks awful. Eventually, the boys kind of make amends. Nolan apologizes for what he did to his mother. Sam kind of makes the realization that it's just me and my brother now. And if I'm cross with him, I have no one in the world to help me survive this awful world. So there it is. So what ends up happening the next morning, Nolan decides to try to find help, but because of the events of the night before with Mama, taking her own life, he decides to go ahead and use the rope anyway, even though he's not 100% convinced. What he ends up doing is detaching Mama and Sam's rope from the base. In the basement of the cabin, the rope is tied to an anchor type thing that's, keeping it connected to the house. So Nolan detaches Mama and Sam's rope and creates one incredibly long rope in the hope that he might be able to get far enough from the house to find another human being and maybe get some help. Eventually, he makes it out to a road, like an actual paved road with lines on the middle and everything. But there's no traffic. There's no people, no animals, no nothing. And he's basically screaming for help. He's just screaming, help, help. Is anybody out there? Just screaming at the top of his lungs. Eventually, he gives up and starts walking back home. Well, what ends up happening is someone heard his screams. Someone heard his plea for help and actually followed him home. So that when Nolan gets home, here's this guy who claims to be a hiker. And, his name is Cole. He introduces himself as Cole, says that he's a hiker and that he heard someone calling out for help and was wondering if it was him. Eventually, Nolan admits that, his brother is sick and that they need food. Cole tells him, well, I've got food in my pack right here. I can just give you some of the food that I have. At that exact instant, Sam comes out of the house with Mama's crossbow, which we see her use earlier in the film, and basically has the crossbow pointed at Cole. Cole obviously is a normal guy. He sees a little kid pointing a crossbow at him, and he kind of freaks out. He says, whoa, 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 whoa. There's no need for violence, okay? If you don't want me here, I will leave. But for some reason, Sam won't let him go. Sam basically says, no, stay right there. Don't you fucking move from that spot. And Cole's like, look, I will just go. I will leave you alone, and no one has to get hurt. And Nolan is trying to convince Sam, don't do it. Don't shoot him. He's normal. He's not evil. Obviously, Sam seems to be kind of showing the same signs of psychosis that his mother has, where he doesn't trust anyone or anything and just believes unconditionally that the evil exists and that everything Mama told him was true. Eventually, Cole turns around and starts to walk away. Nolan seems to calm his brother down. Sam ends up not dropping it, but, taking the bow and arrow, the crossbow off of the guy, like not aiming it at him anymore. And it seems like Cole's going to walk away, no problem. But then eventually Sam just changes his mind, picks up the crossbow, and unceremoniously shoots Cole with an arrow. The arrow goes through him. Oh my God, it looks painful as shit. Shot in the back on his right side, and it comes out the front. So, I mean, that thing had to have taken out at least one of his kidneys and his liver. So Cole basically is crawling away from the house. And Nolan is admonishing his brother for doing that. Why would you do that? He's not evil. And Sam is basically calling Nolan an idiot, saying, I can't believe you think that these people are real. Don't you understand that everyone is evil? They're all trying to get us. Eventually, Nolan decides to follow the blood trail that Cole left, because obviously he's bleeding out from the bolt in his fucking midsection. And when he catches up to him, Cole is in the process of calling 911 on his cell phone. And guess what? An operator picks up and she says, 911, what's your emergency? Unfortunately, at this point, Cole is on the brink of death. He can't speak anymore. He's just gurgling up blood. And we hear the 911 operator basically say, sir, where are you? Tell me where you are. I'll send help, blah, blah, blah. And while this is all happening, Nolan grabs the guy's book bag to see if there was actually food in there, like the guy said. And then they get into a little tug of war with the book bag. Unfortunately, Cole does eventually succumb to the injury and he dies with the 911 operator still on the phone.
I assume, too, the kids don't even know what the cell phone
not at all.
Because they didn't know what the camera was. So, because that should have been another telltale sign that this guy's not a demon. Because if they would have been under normal circumstances, the kids would have grabbed the phone and said, hey, our asses need help too. Exactly.
Yeah, they probably don't even know what a normal telephone is. I mean, from all intents and purposes, it looks like these three people have been in the woods since the boys were babies, very, very small anyway. So they've been out there for years at this point. So Cole is now dead. Nolan picks up the book bag, and takes it back to the house. He opens up the bag, and lo and behold, Cole was telling the truth. The bag is filled with food. There's like cans of Hormel chili and canned peaches and granola bars and just all sorts of food and bottles of water and everything. And Nolan just starts eating. He opens up the can of chili, and it's the first real food this poor kid has probably had in over a year, probably even longer since he's had anything besides squirrel or rabbit. So he's literally chowing down on this can of Hormel chili, just loving it. And finally, his brother Sam comes down to the kitchen, and Nolan is trying to convince him to eat some of this food, because Sam is the one who's malnourished and, basically just going crazy. But Sam refuses to eat anything. He's like, no, I can't believe you're so stupid. You're actually believing that guy was a human and that he was here to help us. How can you be so stupid? Just constantly berating his younger brother for basically having logic, which is kind of hysterical, but there it is. Eventually, we do see Sam sneak down to the kitchen and start munching down on the food. We see him eating one of the granola bars, the can of peaches. We see Nolan asleep on the couch, still gripping the can of Hormel chili. I think he now has a favorite food. I'm pretty sure Hormel chili is now his favorite food for the rest of his life. And we think that Sam is going to start to get better because he's finally eating. He kind of snuck it behind his brother's back so that his brother didn't realize that he just succumbed and said, okay, fuck it, I'll eat something. What ends up happening then is later that same day in the evening, actually, Sam is outside. He thinks he hears something in the greenhouse. And when he walks out there, he sees his mother standing with her back to the door. Mama's standing there with her back to the door. So we don't see her face. We just see her back. And then Sam freaks out. He's like, oh, my God, Mama, Mama. And he runs into the greenhouse. But when he goes in there, he looks at the spot where Mama was standing, and she's not standing there anymore. And then he looks down on the ground, and Mama's dead body is still right where they left it. And he even makes kind of a stinky gesture, because obviously the smell of rotting flesh is awful for those of you who've never smelled it. So now we start to kind of realize that I think Sam has kind of inherited this psychosis from his mother, this, belief of this evil out here in the woods. So that evening, after he realizes that his mother's dead body is still on the ground, suddenly he hears the voice of a little girl. And he turns around, and earlier in the film, after they killed Cole and started looking through his bag, they looked and found his wallet, and there was a picture in the wallet of Cole with a little girl, presumably her daughter. Well, this is the same little girl in the picture, and she's literally telling Sam, asking Sam, have you seen my father? He's tall, he has dark hair, and, Sam denies it. Sam basically says, no, I haven't seen anybody. I don't know what you're talking about. But then the little girl realizes that Sam is holding her father's flashlight. It's a very distinct flashlight. It's like a big mag light. And she basically asks him, where did you get that flashlight? That's my father's flashlight. And then Sam starts apologizing. He starts saying, I didn't know he was normal. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. And then the little girl looks behind Sam, sees the covered dead body of Mama, and assumes that that's her father, her father's dead body in the greenhouse. And she runs away. She just starts to run away. At this point, I think Sam starts to maybe believe that maybe there is no evil. Maybe Mama was lying to us, and, there's nothing in the woods. He's chasing after the little girl, asking her to come back. I don't know why, but he's basically telling her, no, please come back. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Basically apologizing for killing her father, even though he never said in so many words that he did. But, he's kind of implying it. Eventually, he loses track of the little girl, and the rope runs out. He runs out of room, so he can't advance anymore because the rope is still tied to the house. So he basically decides, well, I know that little girl's real. I know she's not evil because she would have attacked me already if she really wanted to. So, of course, Sam lets go of the rope, unties the rope, and then he sees the little girl running away in the distance, and he starts chasing her. Again, he loses track of her, and then suddenly we as the audience see something climbing a tree behind him. And at first we see two little hands, and then we see another set of two little hands, and then we see another set of two little hands. So literally a creature with 6 arms is somehow walking up this tree. And like I said, Sam's not looking at this. This is for us, the audience. So again, it kind of makes you question the reality of everything that's going on. Eventually, Sam realizes that, the creature ends up attacking Sam from behind. We never really get a great shot of the creature, but it basically looks like the little girl, but with 6 arms, and it's crawling around kind of like a centipede or an ant or something, Eventually, she attacks Sam, grabs his hand with her tongue, and then a little piece of her tongue detaches and starts to go down Sam's throat. It actually goes in there, and then suddenly we see Sam's eyes gloss over white, and the scene ends. So obviously, we're all like, oh, shit. Is the evil real? Holy crap. The next time we see Sam, he's back at home, sitting in his bedroom, and his brother walks into the room, and, he's continuing to apologize for what he did to Mama and everything else. And eventually he realizes that his brother's acting weird, that he's not acting normal. So he tells his brother, let's say the prayer, the prayer that they supposedly can't say if they're possessed by the evil. They hold hands. Nolan touches a piece of the house, a piece of the wood, and he starts saying the prayer, but Sam doesn't. And what we see is Sam reach for the machete that he's hiding underneath his sheets on his bed. He grabs the machete and he goes to chop Nolan's hand off, but Nolan fortunately moves his hand soon enough, realizing, and at this point his brother's eyes are white again. So Nolan realizes that that's not his brother, or at least not completely, that is his brother possessed by the evil. Unfortunately, Sam is able to get out of the room, and he puts a large piece of furniture blocking the door, trapping Nolan in the bedroom. And then what we see is Sam go downstairs, and he sets the goddamn house on fire. Literally sets the house on fire. He sets the whole first floor on fire with his brother trapped up on the second floor. And like an absolute psychopath, he goes outside with the camera that Mama showed him. There was a scene with a camera earlier that I'm not going to get into. But he's sitting there with the Polaroid camera, and he's just like, he sits on the ground Indian style, like he's just waiting for his brother to come out. He's got the machete, he's got the camera, and he's just sitting there waiting. Eventually, Nolan climbs up on the second floor roof out of his bedroom. He climbs out his bedroom window onto the second floor roof, sees his brother sitting in the lawn with the machete and the camera just waiting for him. And then, Sam says something like, you can't stay in there forever. Oh, no, he says that the cabin can't protect you anymore. Once this fire destroys this cabin, nothing will protect you, and I'll be able to get you. What ends up happening is Nolan climbs back into this house through his mother's bedroom window, which is open, and then he goes ahead and goes down the stairs to the first floor, which is almost completely engulfed in flames at this point. And then he hears a very familiar voice calling to him from the darkness, and it's Mama. And we see the visage of Mama come out of the darkness and say, I forgive you. I forgive you for what you did. Nolan, being the smart kid that he is, starts screaming, you're not my mother. You're not my mother. You're something else. And, but she continues the ruse of being Mama, saying, I forgive you. I don't hold any ill will for you. And, now we can all be together. Once this fire engulfs us all, we can all be together again. He eventually ends up trapping the creature, and I completely skipped the whole, secret chamber thing that they have. Within the house, they have this kind of, a crawl space. They have like a crawl space underneath the living room floor that's only big enough to hold like maybe 1 or 2 people. They utilize this as almost, they call it a cleansing ceremony. Mama believes that every time they go out of the house, even with the rope on them, they still bring a little evil back in the house. Maybe not enough to take over anybody and do any major damage, but she believes that they still have evil in them. So she puts them in this crawl space for an hour for them to just kind of think and, will the evil away, like whatever evil they brought back to the house, to will it away through prayer or meditation or whatever the hell you want to go with. So, point is, with the house completely on fire, Nolan opens up the crawl space, purposely opens it up very loudly, and then closes it very loudly so that Mama hears it and thinks that he climbed in there. She eventually comes into the living room, opens up the crawl space, and sees that there's nothing in there. Nobody's in there. But then Nolan comes running from behind, tackles her, and they both fall into the crawl space, and then Nolan closes it behind them. He's holding Mama down, basically saying, I love you, Mama, I love you. I'm trying to save you, cryptic stuff like that. Eventually, we start to see the Mama entity start to peel its outer skin. Literally, it almost turns into body horror because something is like coming out of her skin. Like we see that her back rip open, and we see like a spiny back start to come out. Eventually, we see the actual creature, and because it's nighttime, they're in a small confined space and the lighting isn't great. We don't get to see a great shot of it, but it looks kind of amphibian, kind of snake-like. It's got like a scaly skin. It looks, fairly basic evil. It almost looks like the mermaid at the end of Bad Fish. If anybody saw Bad Fish, that recent mermaid horror movie, it looks very similar to the creature at the end of that movie. And then, Nolan is still holding it down. The creature has completely exposed itself, so we see it in all its glory. But Nolan is still holding it down there, basically saying the prayer. Our paradise is this cabin. This house protects us. Blah 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 blah. Whatever the prayer is. And then eventually the creature just kind of dissipates into the air, almost like Thanos snapped his fingers and dusted her. She literally just dissipates into dust and goes away. The movie fades to black, and when it fades back up, it's the next morning. The house is completely burnt to the ground. There's nothing left of the cabin, but we see firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, and we start to realize, oh shit, maybe Mama was a little crazy. And I forgot to mention that while the house was burning, Nolan took a selfie with the Polaroid camera. He literally takes the camera, turns it around so it's pointing at him with the burning house in the background. And actually, it's very similar to that meme from like 10 years ago of the little girl smiling in front of a burning house. I couldn't believe how similar it actually looked to that. And after the paramedics are digging through the house, the debris, they open up the crawl space. And there's Nolan, and he's still alive. I mean, he's obviously badly burnt. He's got, smoke inhalation and everything else, but he's still alive. They end up getting a helicopter to, fly him out of the area and take him to the hospital. Once he comes to in the helicopter, he starts saying, "I can't leave my brother. My brother's still here. We have to go get him." Finally, the paramedic in the helicopter says, "No, your brother's right here. He's fine." And then Nolan looks over, and there's Sam. And then Nolan just says to Sam, "We're free. We're free. We're finally free of the evil," or whatever, because Nolan thinks that he destroyed the evil, when it dissipated in the crawl space during the fire. And Sam doesn't really say anything. He just kind of has a glazed look over his eyes. But then finally he looks over at his brother and says, "Mama likes me more." Basically exactly what Nolan thought he heard his brother say earlier in the movie. We actually see Sam say it in front of the camera, which kind of shows that whether this evil was true or not, Sam is fucked. Sam is just done. He absolutely believes that either he is still possessed by the evil, or he's just not going to trust anyone, and probably run amok once he actually gets out of the hospital or something. And then the final shot of the movie is, once again, we see the burnt house, and then we see the Polaroid camera on the ground. The camera slowly pans or slowly zooms into the camera, and then the Polaroid shot, the selfie that Sam took earlier of the burning house. We see the picture, and what do we see in the picture? We see a ghostly hand on Sam's shoulder. Well, ghostly, I mean, maybe not ghostly, because it is solid. It looks almost like a zombie hand. Like, it looks like it belongs to the evil, that lady that we see multiple times in the film. And then our film fades to black, and that's our movie, Never Let Go 2024. And like I said earlier, it's the picture that makes me think that maybe there is some truth to what we watched, because like I said, and like Mike mentioned earlier as well, no one in the film picks up the picture. It's not like a paramedic picks it up and says, "Hey, what's that hand?" Or, looks at it and, doesn't see a hand or whatever. It's literally just there for the viewer. It's there for us. So is it there to confuse us? Is it there to kind of almost like a MacGuffin, or, something to make us think we know what happened, but the story is actually the opposite? It's all left to the interpretation of the viewer. Did all of this actually happen? Was Mama crazy, and did she just pass that craziness off to Sam? Like I said, I love movies like this, because the whole drive home, I'm just thinking about all these different things that I saw that either support that this was all a hallucination, or support that this actually all happened. And like I said, it's just up to your interpretation. No one's right or wrong. Whatever your opinion, is valid, and whatever your defense of that opinion is probably also still valid. Now, like I said, if people take this movie at face value, they're probably just going to say, yes, the evil was real because of the picture and, some of the other stuff that we saw throughout it. But like I said, Aja is a brilliant filmmaker. He could have thrown that in there as a double cross for all we know. Who knows? But yeah, there's your movie.
To me, so if I had to pinpoint one, like, to me, there's like different, hints and clues throughout the movie. If I had to pinpoint one that determined it for me, it comes down to the hiker, because it's the one character that multiple people in the movie saw. Because when it came to the demon, whether you thought there were like actual creatures or demons or whatever the manifestations were, usually only one person on screen at a time ever saw them. But the hiker was the one that two people saw. They saw him in the same form as just a regular person, and the one son thought it was a hiker, the other thought it was a demon, and then they reacted the way the way they reacted. But by the time the hiker meets his demise, I think we're pretty sure the hiker was just a hiker, because I don't think a demon would be holding a cell phone calling 911. So,
well, that's what's funny, because I feel like this is one scenario that I thought of, that the evil actually does exist. And you would think that as soon as the hiker came anywhere near the house, that the demon would take it over. But wouldn't it be better for the demon to actually let Cole get to the house and confuse the boys? Like, this could literally be a double cross by the demon itself, or the evil, if you will, allowing Cole to get there, giving the boys that sense of doubt of, that shadow of doubt of, oh, maybe mama was crazy. But then we see the whole scene with, the little girl turning into the centipede thing, or, like I said, the picture at the end. Honestly, I don't think we'll ever get a solid answer. And I have a funny feeling that if anybody even asked Alexander Aja, did this actually happen or not, he would probably give a cryptic answer or give a sly smile to the interviewer and not give us a direct answer. Because I think that's the brilliance of this movie. I don't need to know whether this happened or not. I enjoyed the journey. I enjoyed watching this family try to survive in this supposedly evil forest. Oh, and then I forgot to mention, folks, earlier during our general thoughts, I mentioned that Halle Berry says a line in the movie that's never explained. And it comes in the scene where she's trapped in the greenhouse by Nolan. She basically says, "I'm sorry, I lied to you. I lied to you. I actually brought the evil here." Almost like she's implying that the evil's not all over the world, like she's been telling the boys the whole time, that it's literally only here, and that it's here because of her. Unfortunately, she literally dies, or she literally cuts her own throat 30 seconds later. So we never get any kind of explanation on what she meant by that. Did she mean that she brought it because, this thing has some kind of personal vendetta against her family? Because, she killed her mother, her father, and her husband under the guise that they were possessed by this evil. So, that line
it's
kind of
genetically passed down schizophrenia.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
No, absolutely, which is valid. Again, I'm not going to argue with anybody's opinion on whether this was real or not, because I feel like all arguments are valid. But I'm the kind of guy that wants to believe that, that kind of evil exists in this world. So, I personally am going to lean towards, yes, that there is some evil in these woods. It's obviously isolated to these woods, because once they get out of the woods, we see this big city with houses and people walking the street and cars and everything. So obviously, if the evil actually does exist, it only exists near this cabin or in these woods or whatever the case may be. Or, like I said, that one cryptic line from Mama, that she brought the evil here, that's either an admission that she's crazy, or that this thing, like I said, has some kind of vendetta against her family. So,
well, yeah, because if you're to believe her on face value, earlier in the movie, she's talking about basically the world has ended and we're the only ones left.
Right.
And we're out here because we escaped the evil that took over the world. So at the end, with the helicopter shot of the town, it's like, well, right then and there, it's like we know some of what she's saying at least is not true. And
Right. Yep.
so it's like little things like that that make me think like, okay, I guess you could have a scenario where there's evil in some representation, but it's not literally what she says it is, I guess. So
Yeah.
if I'm trying to play both sides of it, but I also did look up really briefly during the walkthrough, a Q&A, Halle Berry kind of gave the answer of like, let the viewer decide for themselves.
Nice. That's what I like to hear. Like, I don't want an answer for this. Like, I feel like if Aja ever comes out and says yes, definitively this or this, it might actually take away from the movie for me, because I want that ambiguity at least in this movie. You know, sometimes I'm not the biggest fan of ambiguity, but in this one, it worked so well, and I enjoyed the ride. I enjoyed every minute of this movie. Like, at no point was I bored or wondering what was gonna, wondering when the next thing was gonna happen, because it was so slow or whatever. Like, for whatever it's worth, I enjoyed this movie from beginning to end, despite the rude movie viewers in my theater.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our thoughts on Never Let Go. But let's see if we've put out anything else since our last episode, Venom. Is there anything for people to listen to?
Nothing yet. Don, Derek, and myself have recorded episode 30 of No More Room in Hell Presents Creature Comforts. I am in the process of editing it. Unfortunately, the process is pretty slow because I've been sick for the last couple of days, and when I'm sick, I just don't want to do anything other than just rest and drink plenty of fluids. But once I start to feel better, I'm about halfway done editing it, and I've got all my edits and everything. It's just I got to put everything together. So I'm hoping that it'll be out by the end of this week. Like I said, that is episode 30 of Creature Comforts, where we looked at Dwayne Johnson's Rampage, which actually is a way more fun movie than people give it credit for. But I'll leave my thoughts on that to the show. Like I said, hopefully it'll be out by the end of the week. At the absolute worst, it'll be out early next week. And ultimately, that's pretty much all I have. I did get my movie assignments for the podcast Under the Stairs Horror Head-to-Head. I'll be looking at one Alexander de Iglesias movie and one Joe Dante movie. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'll leave those movies a mystery for now. We don't have a recording date or anything, but we do have our pairings, the people that we're going to be going up against, and blah, blah, blah. So once I get more information, I'll let you guys know. But otherwise, that's it for me.
All right. How about you, Don?
As mentioned, latest episode of Creature Comfort should be coming along when Venom's healthy enough to fix everything. My guest appearance on Indie Film Cafe's 31 Days of Indie Horror is still scheduled for sometime mid-October. And season 3 of Horror Countdown is available for everybody as I await season 4 coming in the new year. That's everything.
All right, cool. Let's see. So yeah, I think the current plan is for us to try to record a second episode this week for The Substance, as long as I know Venom's feeling a little under the weather, if he's okay enough to go see it before the end of the weekend. But yeah, so that's we're leaning towards it, but it's still a maybe at this point. But do you know what comes out this week that would be for next week's episode?
Damn it. No, something does come out this week. Let me open my app here. I don't remember what. Because I thought The Substance came out this week. I didn't actually realize that The Substance and Never Let Go came out the same.
I know there's my theater's getting showings for it, but I don't know how big of a movie it is. Samara Weaving's in it, and it's like some weird cult movie. But I think there's like a bigger release. Yeah,
Asriel, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that might be it. I thought there was like a bigger release coming too, but maybe not. Maybe that is the one that is coming out this week.
I don't know because it's
I
not
saw it
over
on
by
my
me.
Regal app when I was looking.
Yeah,
I know it.
opens on Friday.
That's weird. I don't see anything over by me. Maybe it's gonna go up this week or not, but I haven't seen anything for it yet.
Huh. Yeah, I've got it on my AMC app. I'm looking at it now. Opening day, September 27th. So yeah, that's this Friday. I could have sworn there was one other thing. Monster Summer is next week. Terrifier is the week after that. I think Baghead is in there somewhere. That's a smaller release, but it is still playing at AMC. But I don't know if that's something that we'll all be able to get to. But yeah, we've got multiple theatrical options over the next couple of weeks. Well, next couple of months, actually, because right on through September, we're probably going to get a new horror film in theaters. Oh, Smile. When does Smile open?
Smell 2 is like late October, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, October 18th. You're right.
Yeah.
So Joker opens this week. I just remember the year that the first Joker came out, there were multiple podcasters who had that as their number one horror film of the year, which, okay. I'm not going to argue with that, but I mean, it's a spectacular film. I absolutely love it. Horror, that's a bit of a stretch.
If you can justify it, fine by me. I'm not going to make that argument, but if you can justify it, fine by me.
Yeah, I think we've got other options anyway, so I think we should be good. I don't think we'll have to settle for the and there's a horror comedy coming out this week too, but it looks like it's a family movie. I can't remember what it was. Damn it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if for any reason we can't all get Azrael, like get to see it, there's also the new Joko Anwar one on Netflix if we need to use a VOD.
That's right. Also, VHS. Doesn't VHS drop soon? VHS Beyond?
That's sci-fi, though. That's not going to be horror.
Oh, it's not? Oh, good. I don't have to watch it. Yay.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
I'll probably still watch it. It's VHS.
I'm getting a bunch of advertisements for it from Shudder because I work with them, and everything that they're saying is that it's, sci-fi.
Actually, you're right, because I did read a tweet from Barbara Crampton this morning that said, she actually said VHS Beyond is her favorite VHS movie because they went sci-fi. So yeah, you're probably right. Cool.
Alrighty then. So with that said, yeah, we basically what this last 5 minutes tells us, there's no shortage of options. We'll just figure it out when we get closer to the next time to record. So with that said, we're going to get out of here. So thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We'll be back in maybe less than a week with another episode. So let's say bye to the listeners.
Later.
Always question authority. Never believe what your parents tell you.
Yeah, if you want to live off the land, maybe learn about the land first. It might help.
Yeah. That's another thing I didn't really understand. They had been out there for years, but they didn't seem to be any better at trapping or harvesting or anything. They were terrible.
Maybe they just went to the Arcadian School of Post-Apocalyptic Survival Skills.
Peace.